we are going to move on to our next presenter. Nicholas Haas-Brown is an advising specialist in forensic investigative sciences at West Virginia University. He is here to tell us how to keep calm and reflect on lessons learned to turn surviving in advising into thriving in advising.
Thank you, Deb. And hello, everybody. I just want to say thank you to all of the presenters that have already gone. As Deb said, my name is Nick Haas-Brown, and I am just finishing up not just finishing up, I finished up my first year of advising here this past May. And there are a lot of lessons that I've learned over the last year that I would kind of like to talk about today. Now, for the more veteran advisors, you're probably gonna look at me and go, well, yeah, we know that these are lessons, but coming from a first year and really learning on the job, kind of some of the soft skills. We learn technical skills all the time, but I want to focus on some of the soft skills that I find are pretty key and integral to all of our jobs. And sometimes I've heard advisors kind of make some comments that put me on pause and was like, wait a minute, is that how we really want to work? So sometimes just kind of a reminder of how to go through that. So just want to make sure, can you all see these slides?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So again, just a little bit about me. I am a full-time advisor for the Forensic and Investigative Science Department. This is actually my second advising job within the last year. So I started in the Center for Learning, Advising, and Student Success, where I got a lot of my technical training. And then 5 short months of working there, I did get to go back to where I graduated from. So I am a graduate of the Forensic and Investigative Science Department, and I have been lucky to be able to advise the students kind of seeking careers that I once thought 10 years ago. Again, May 2023 marks the end of my first year as an advisor. And because it was the end of the first year of advising, I really wanted to focus on the reflection of how that went. So just to kind of give you an idea of where we're going to go today, I always like to, as a scientist, I like to talk about kind of what does research say on self-awareness, as well as doing some of that reflection. After we talk about kind of some of those key points, I would like to talk about key lessons that I learned and some amazing advice that I got from some of the people who trained me. And then talk about everyone's favorite anecdotal evidence, talk about a story where everything that could go wrong could have gone wrong in this story. And coming from a first year perspective, this is where a lot of my lessons kind of learned and culminated from this one experience. And then I have some ideas for continued reflection as a community, but as how we can grow through those reflections as we're going through the community. And then if we have any time left, definitely any questions. So when I was doing a little bit of a literature review on self-awareness, I had looked through a couple papers and I found a paper that did their own literature review that kind of culminated a lot of information in one place, which I would like to talk about. And they have 3 pieces of findings that I found extremely interesting, and I want to talk about and how it relates to today's talk. So the very first one is self-reflection is extremely multifaceted with no discrete way to measure. So what they found is because self-reflection is so personal to everybody, it comes at a bunch of different ways. And because everybody is doing it slightly different, it is really difficult for the researchers to find a discrete way of what is the perfect way for self-reflection. Because what my perfect self-reflection is going to be different from everybody else's. And that's going to be important when we start to kind of come together as a community and start to talk about it and kind of figure out what ways of self-reflection can help us as a community. The other thing is they talked about something called the adaptive performance models. And these are ways of self-reflection that can help determine what is known versus unknown through learning from uncertainty. I think after reading kind of this paper, this is a lot of what we do in advising. A lot of what we learn is coming from situations with students where we don't always know the answer going in. And it has to be the quick thinking, and it has to be the nimble on our feet to be able to turn around and work through these adaptive performance models and kind of learn through what we don't know. And then finally, self-awareness can be positively influenced by mindfulness training, some feedback interventionship, or not internships, sorry. We have internships in my program, so I'm used to saying that. And feedback interventions and mentorships. And this is going to be really important in those action items that I have at the very end. So just to go through some of the key lessons that I have learned, the very first key lesson is put your pride aside. There were a lot of times when I entered the profession where it's like, I'm the professional, I know what I'm doing, I have to show the student I know what I'm doing, to come across as relatable, as kind of building that rapport with the student. But what I had found is there were definitely some situations where I put my pride first sometimes, and that helped me and led me to kind of steer the students wrong. It is very similar to the Black Knight in the picture on the left, where he keeps getting his limbs chopped off in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, says it's but a scratch. And he's putting that pride and not recognizing when he needs help or when he needs to bow out of the fight. We work in the field of education, so we are constantly learning things as well. And this is really important to remember of putting our pride aside. When we put our pride aside, we can say, I don't know that, and that's okay. So I'm going to go find the answer to learn it. The other thing that pride prevents us to do is help the students to the best of our ability. When we put our pride first, we are really focusing ourselves versus the student, which goes into key lesson number 2, which is centering the student. At the end of the day, our job is to help guide these students through their 4 years. Yes, it's helping them find the perfect schedule, but it's also helping them on various life circumstances that are coming across our desks. I mean, I know I have seen people who have dealt with family death, and I've had to talk through the grieving process, but also how do we recover our coursework and things like that. So we need to focus on centering those students and making sure that we are doing what is in the best interest of those students. And part of that is not being afraid to have those difficult conversations. So with the Forensic Investigative Science Department, it is very STEM based. And our students struggle sometimes with math, with chemistry, with physics and biology. And sometimes after they've taken it the second or third time, we have to have those difficult conversations of, listen, it is absolutely okay that science is not your strong suit. Strong suits are different for everybody. Let's find you a alternate path to continue getting you what you would like, and kind of get you in the direction that is going to feel fulfilling to you. And the other thing we have to be careful when we center the student is having those negative thoughts on, and I'm using problem students in quotation marks. Those problem students aren't truly problem students, but they are the students that come in with all of the questions. They give us a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, a little gut wrench of when they come across our desk, it's, okay, what is it going to be this time? And when we center the students, it is very much like one of my colleagues, Brandon Squires, told me when I first started. Advising is not punitive. And when we are dealing with these students, we can't be thinking about, okay, how do I just get them across my desk? How do I just get them the easiest answer without actually fully giving them the top-notch service that we can? So it's kind of keeping that in mind as we are centering those students. And then lesson number 3 is ask for help. There are a lot of times where sometimes we feel siloed and we can't always get the answer we need, or we don't have that answer readily available. We need to create and we need to keep open in mind that there are people all across the university that can ask it, that can be there to help us. I know specifically for us in the Eberly College of Arts and Sciences here at WVU, we do have a Teams chat that we actively use where we can ask for help when we come across a situation we haven't come across before. But the reason why asking for help is so important is when we start to stack policy on policy on policy on top of one another when helping a student, it can be very difficult navigating that minefield. So asking for help can help us navigate and find the answers in the gray area between those policies and kind of working in some of those gray areas that we're not ready for at the moment. And asking for help also avoids leading the students astray. We want to make sure that we give the students accurate advice and accurate information. And that actually leads to key lesson number 4 is learning how to fall on our sword and being honest with our mistakes. Um, I have found that being honest with my mistakes with the students has helped really build rapport with the students. And the story I'm going to talk about is really the key piece of that. Being honest with our mistakes really helps us put into perspective of, I actually messed that up. But when you tell the student, hey, I am sorry that I gave you this information that was not entirely accurate, they're going to trust you a little bit more because they know that you're going to be able to come back to them anytime you make those mistakes. It also helps provide them clarity when they are extremely confused. Now, I do have to put the warning, do not overshare those mistakes and go into depth with those mistakes, mainly for the fact of then it just looks like you're a hot mess, and the student could look back and go, am I trusting this advisor? So that leads us into kind of the story and that culmination of where all of this went wrong. So last fall, it was probably about 6 months into my advising, I had a student that had what looked like a prerequisite issue. So the person that had been in the position before me had roughly 300 to 350 students. So there were some things that slipped by. And when I first started the position, I kind of put my pride first and I said, I have to fix all of these students or student problems immediately. I have to fix them within the next month that I have to get them a schedule. And when I did that, what I did is I opened the floodgate to my emotions coming out and being directly applied to the student, which was a huge problem. What happened with the student was when they came into the university, the way the credits came in, they didn't meet certain prereqs and they were put into the proper chemistry class. Because of that, that meant that they may have had to take a summer chemistry class to stay on a 4-year track, and the student felt severely misled. When I looked through their piece, I did a quick look, and from what I saw, they had been misled. And I said, you're right, you were misled. I am sorry about that. We need to fix this. We need to do this. I'm going to help you as much as I can. I reached out for help in our academic affairs office and had amazing help from our lead in the academic affairs office, Sam Jacino. And when we started to look deeper, it was actually that I had made the mistake. I didn't look close enough into the details of those prerequisites of how things came in to realize that a mistake had never been made in the first place. After having that conversation with Sam, after the student had talked with Sam, I made sure to follow up with an email and apologize and say, hey, I am sorry that I misled you here. Because what happened is not the previous advisor's fault. She was following policy. That is exactly where you should have been. And I stirred up that anger in you when I shouldn't have. So it's always important to recognize those mistakes and really let the students know, because that can have them trust you so that they can hear and be heard. From here, where do we go? So really, because of that reflection that I did within the first year, at the end of the first year, I looked back and I said, how did my first year go? What were the big ups? What were the big downs? Where do I go from here? How do I increase what I do and the service I provide to students? And in that reflection, I realized that when I talked through the stories with other advisors, when I talked through what was going on and leaned on other people, I found that I was able to grow a little bit more because they were able to offer some advice that they had as well. So I think where we go from here is we reflect, we share with each other, and we grow. And so a couple of ways that I've been thinking about we can do that and ideas to nurture that growth in connection with this conference. The very first thing is connect, is creating working groups amongst advisors to share their stories, work together through solutions to problems that occur. Make this so that it's not so siloed, and make this extremely interdepartmental so that we can hear issues happening at other departments where we may not necessarily face those issues, but something could come up that is very similar. If we create these working groups, especially among new advisors, where they can kind of talk about these issues that they're coming, we can come to the table, work together as a community to grow. And that also will help us strategize a little bit. When we strategize, we can encourage self-reflection once or twice a year, where we really reflect back on how did this past semester go? How did this past year go? What did I do well? What were some of the areas that I can improve on? And as we strategize through that, and we work through those working groups when we connect, we can then create new ways and talk about new ways to encourage growth as a community. And we can figure out new and better ideas to help service our students as much as we can. And then that leads us to kind of the mobilization. When we mobilize, we talk, we work through those working groups, we can kind of think about cohesive onboarding protocols. To be perfectly honest, in my 2 different advising positions, we've had 2 very different levels of training. So in my first one, it was very hands-on training, kind of work through all of the technical skills, do some shadowing and things like that. In my second job, because I had already some of that information, it wasn't as detailed of training, but I know I've had a coworker join on since who is brand new to advising that when we were working on, we did the best that we could for shadowing and all of that, but it wasn't as cohesive as that first plan. So if we can create a cohesive onboarding protocols where we standardize training processes across the campus, where we can get input from veteran advisors of what can help and what could have helped them when they were first starting, that can help kind of lift us up a little bit faster as advisors. And the final thing is think of interdepartmental mentorship programs between veteran and new advisors. And I really want this to be interdepartmental, mainly for the fact of if we silo ourselves to the people who have gone through the exact same things, we're not opening our eyes to what other problems could be happening in other areas that could come down the road for us. So I think interdepartmental mentorship is really going to be helpful and can really help these veteran or these new advisors by pairing them up with a veteran advisor. So with that, thank you for listening. I will gladly take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Nicholas.